Hello, everybody. I'm Leslie Elliott Boyce, and I am joined today by Cari Bartholomew and Christine Sefein-Wolk. And this is another installment in our long series of discussions that we've been having on this channel under the heading of Sanity Check. So if you are interested in checking out the archives, haven't seen them, please do. Lots of good discussions with these two wonderful women. And it's so nice to see you both today. How's
Thank
everybody
you.
doing?
Good.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
Are
been
you
a
in the
week, but
Christmas spirit? It's the happy holidays, everybody. Christmas episode.
yes, happy holidays. Yeah, I'm mostly done. We spend it at my sister's house, so I just have to deal with the wrapping of the gifts and that kind of preparation. And I think I'm making a pie this year. But other than that,
Yeah.
um, she has a lot more on her hands to do than I do
Yeah.
preparing. So, but yeah, all is going well.
How about you, Carrie?
No, I'm
Uh,
I'm so busy with so many things. I was telling you, like I'm directing this play of 11 kids, ages 4 through 6, and the Four Little Pigs and the Big Bad Wolf. So after that disaster ends, then I think I'll be ready to focus on Christmas. But right now,
oh my, yes.
yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be a really interesting thing. That's really cool to be involved in the hopefully 4 to 6 year olds. Their parents are just expecting cuteness, not perfection.
Yes, that is right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's pretty funny because I threw in like really big words. There's these two little boys who they're brothers and they're inseparable. So they are pigs 2 and 3,
Hmm.
and they carry big giant books that say like the pig's lophacy instead of philosophy.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh,
And they use words like according to my calculations. So
Uh,
that's kind of funny.
oh
But
my
yeah,
that's
gosh.
so cute.
we'll
That's
That's
see
fun.
if they can
that's
remember.
adorable.
Yeah, pretty
S-
funny.
So you are working with homeschoolers, right? Not
Hmm.
not the in the school system.
Mm-mm.
Mm.
No, no, I work at two separate places. So in one, I work with high schoolers and then I'm teaching drama to little guys. And then in the other school, I teach upper elementary and middle school.
Mm.
And I was telling Leslie about this project that we did yesterday because I woke up and I know next week we're doing Jeopardy and having a party. So it's kind of like, well, what are we going to do this week? And I just wanted to teach them why we teach
Yeah.
history, right? And so the main reason why we teach history, and I say this to them every single week, why do we learn history? History is the story of our past. But is it every story? Do we know everything about history? No, and we can't. So, what do you think about the concept that every single student, um, or I mean, that every single teacher has an agenda? What's an agenda? Oh, that's your planner. No, I don't mean
Right.
I don't mean that's your planner. I mean that every single person who teaches you has an agenda. So how do you feel about that? And I told you guys about when I lied to my whole class and made them do the puppy assignment. So and I just said my agenda is unapologetically to teach you history, but also to have you walk away having an appreciation for the country that you live in. That does not mean that I'm going to hide the worst and the ugly and the awful things that are true about our history, but it means that you're going to be able to look and criticize it from a place of love, from a place where you want it to be better, but you're also going to be able to appreciate the amazingly good things that it's done. So
Mm.
that's how our class started. And then after that, I wanted to do a unity thing. So I actually wrote Howard Zinn. I wrote Howard Zinn and I said, now this person has written a history book. And in his history book, his main focus is to get people to hate America. It takes the grievances, and I'm writing that word up on the board, of
Mm.
what America has done wrong, and it just really hammers that in. And I said, so both of us have an agenda. You're never going to go to a classroom where a teacher doesn't have an agenda. And they were like, what if the teacher's just playing Candy Crush? Okay, well, they still have an agenda to do as little work as possible and to get paid for it,
Right.
right? so, so then what we did is we took a what was it? A skein of yarn. And one person would give a statement. And then if people agreed with them, they'd throw the yarn towards them and they'd all hold it. And what we made was this giant web of unity. So imagine 24 kids in the class. My example to them was, I love sushi. So then anybody else who loves sushi takes it. Well, my first kid jumps up and the first thing they say is, I support LGBTQ rights.
Mm,
Oh gosh. Wow.
Exactly, like your eyes right there. So
mm,
so only a certain number of my kids, I want to be vague in case, so only a certain number of my kids said yes to that, and so they got it. And I was like, I could see what was happening in the class. And I said, everybody close your eyes, keep holding your thread, but close your eyes and just raise your hand if that kind of question makes you feel uncomfortable. And of all of the kids, only two of them raised their hands on that. But then the next kid grabbed it and they said, um, I think that Trump is going to make the whole world a better place. And a certain number of kids raised their hands for that one, you know. And so they took it there. That was not my goal.
So
My goal
you did the
was,
same exercise where you had them close their eyes and raise their
yes, I
hands after
did.
that?
Every
Okay.
single,
So
yes,
you're just
yes.
kind of, when the controversial things would come up, you'd take the temperature of
Yeah,
how this is affecting the kids without them
exactly.
having that social feedback. Okay.
Exactly. And
Okay.
then in the end, we had this great conversation about how come it is that middle schoolers, I said, you guys had a lot of questions and some of them were difficult. And I said, and yet you guys don't hate each other. You
Mm,
could sit and joke with each other. So what changes between the middle school child to the high school child to the college and to the adult who can't talk? And
mhm.
that really is where the lesson took off, where the kids were saying, people are afraid to listen to each other. They just talk at each other. Now, remind you, this is different than a public school classroom. My son did his assignment, his final for the semester, and it was a collective grade. So they did a test, and the kids just put posters up on the board. But my son was upset enough that he sent me a text, and he said, "So basically, four of us got the class an A."
Mm,
Wow.
So,
Wow.
very different things. My kids are learning to think critically, to have discussions that adults can't have. And I don't mean inappropriate. I just mean adults have been conditioned not to have them. And in the public school, they're watering down and making the kids share grades.
mm-hmm. Wow.
I
So,
was just having a conversation with somebody about this yesterday. It was on a different topic, and my whole kind of viewpoint on many aspects of this is that if we really pay attention to the kids and we really pay attention to what's going on with the schools and we really pay attention to how we educate them, we pay attention to how, we teach them values, morals, sense of character, all of that kind of stuff, that by default, as they get older, they're going to be less likely to get sucked in to some of this propaganda and sucked into the indoctrination. So it's not to say that like this 100% falls squarely on the parent's shoulders. I mean, there's outside influences like culture and society and all of those pieces. But if that was more of where the focus was, I think a lot of these other issues would not turn into as great of problems in adulthood as they are, because we have a lot of very sick adults running around and very sick individuals running around.
we do.
But I wonder if the interventions happened as we were raising kids and the schools were cleaned up, how that would end up affecting the choices they made as they became adults later in the future. So for me, it's always, I mean, I think my viewpoint has changed to what's this doing for kids? How is it harmful for kids? What can we do as adults in the room to stop it or to, choose to do something different with them?
Well, it's really interesting what you're both bringing up here. Something that when Cari, when you were sort of telling me a little bit about this before we started recording, I was thinking about how with children, one of the things when you see little kids out doing activism or having these strong opinions, like the child who throws the LGBTQ thing, like that's someone who is has received an opinion, has been taught that this is the way to be a good person, and without having a lot of life experience to back that up, is full-heartedly endorsing an opinion that's
Mm-hmm.
been received from somebody else. And we see that in general with kids. You've raised a son to adolescence at this point. I've raised I have two sons that are kind of a little bit younger than yours, around the same age as him, and two daughters that are in their 20s now. And I know that as a parent, we're influencing them an awful lot. Even if and we've talked about this before, like as I was raising my daughters, I really had this attitude of I don't want to influence them too much. I want to let them engage with the world and kind of develop their own perspectives, only to find out that their school program that they were in was very heavily trying to influence
Yes.
them, all of the while I was trying to give them breathing room to kind of form their own experiential thought processes. School
Yeah.
wasn't doing that same thing, but one way or the other we get a heaping dose of received opinion,
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
that's your morality teaching. That's
Right.
as it really should be, because the world that we live in, one of the reasons, we have this, we're a social creature. One of our fundamental the aspects of humanity is that we are taught how to live in the world by other people who have been doing it longer than us. So it's not, I don't say this with judgment, but it's interesting to wonder how much, how much are any of us really free thinkers, and how much have we been influenced by those around us? And I think it really shows, like there's the Greta Thunberg sort of
Mm-hmm.
phenomenon where
Mm-hmm.
this kid is coming out and being put on center stage and being held up as an expert, and using pathos to sort of shame the leaders because of
Mm-hmm.
their poor leadership. But that also shows up in that LGBT, like, we're going to throw that. And it also shows up in
Right.
the Trump is going to make it a better world. I mean, all of
Right.
these things.
Yes.
So yeah, I don't have like a specific question about that, but I want to see what your observations and thoughts are.
My first one is that first, how can a parent intervene if they don't know anything is wrong? And the fact is that many in education are are being dishonest with parents. There's nothing to see here. Oh, these people who are saying there's something to see are crazy. You're fine. Your kid's fine. We don't want to stress them out and send them home with homework, whatever else. And the reason they don't want to send them home with homework is they don't want you to see what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing. The other thing is that when I talk to my kids, I tell them, like I said, I want them to love America, but I want them to have a very honest viewpoint. And the reason they have to have that is honestly is we can get it. And I tell them, how do we get our sources? Well, we get our sources from the people who wrote them down.
Mm-hmm.
So many people didn't write anything down, so we don't know where they stand. And I write on the board words like, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
because I want them to recognize when they hear those kind of words. I had one boy who told me that Elon Musk was stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, why? That's all I asked him, why? And he said, well, he made the ugliest truck in the world. And I'm like, fair,
Hmm.
but he's also extremely wealthy, extremely successful. He has multiple businesses. I mean, he shot a rocket up so I'm like, so what we have to ask our children when we're talking to them is, are your feelings, are your opinions based on feelings, or
Mm-hmm.
do you have facts to back them up? And I think that's how we know if we're a free thinker. Also, I think there's got to be a point in your life where you choose the things that make you feel good. It makes me feel good and if I turned off my screen, you'd see it makes me feel good to not live in a hoarder's home.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes my home gets to that place. And
Mm-hmm.
so I choose that. Now, I could choose and say, oh, well, that's whatever, clean people shaming or something, right? And if that makes you feel good, that makes you feel good. But in terms of basing your stuff on facts, I think that's the best way that we can teach and the best way that we can be a free thinker. I am listening to Booker T. Washington's On Character right now because I'm going to teach Black history in February.
Hmm.
Um, and, there's a lot of people who hate him. There's a lot of Black people who hate him and think that he was just bending over and doing what the white man wants. I'm looking at his life going, wow, he's got multiple generations of successful kids. So I'm going to
Yes.
follow that plan because it makes sense. It's factual.
And that's a really good point. Backing up, I guess something else that kind of sparked in me maybe a little bit as an adjacent is, you know, I grew up as a latchkey kid, so my parents heavily relied on school to teach us everything, right? And we were Catholic and we went to church, but it's meaningless, really, church. I mean, unless there's some kind of, it was meaningless for me. I'm just going to say it was meaningless for me. I did not draw upon my own personal sense of value or moral, set of morals from going to church. It was, this once a week thing. And I did go to Catholic school, but we didn't go to church every day. We got, we had religious classes and things that we were taught. But as a Catholic, you're made to feel a lot of guilt. The Catholic guilt is a real thing. And that's something I think I really experienced quite a bit of. But putting that aside, my parents sort of decided, well, you're going to a Catholic school and, we sometimes go to church on Sunday, sometimes don't. My father went to church every single Sunday and he was one of the most impossible people that I've ever interacted with in my life. So that didn't leave a good impression on me in terms of continuing to go to church as an adult. But what I will say is my parents put the trust and the faith that the school would raise us in ways that they couldn't. And that's where it was incredibly dangerous because my parents were immigrants. They didn't speak the language initially. They had to learn the language and then they had to go back to school. So my parents were either working in the day and going to school at night, or they were working two jobs, one during the day and one at night until they were able to move up a little bit. By the time they were able to move up, and start having more things, by the time we got there, I was at least 16. By that point, I had spent all these many years getting told how to be a good person or getting told what's right from wrong from my teachers and from the principal and from, the nuns that we had as some of our teachers. I went to a progressive high school. So my parents would have been probably mortified to know that in that high school, one of our theology teachers of all things used to bring in every, semester, they would have one day where they would talk about safe sex and she would bring in condoms to show what condoms look like and the way that you're supposed to put them on. This is a Catholic school. So, and we had a gay and lesbian group that was also very well accepted. And they were just looked at as people who are gay and lesbian. There was no, we want all of this extra attention. There wasn't all of this raising of pride flags and the hoopla that was around it. So I think that I turned out to be a pretty decent human being, I would say, in the world. But I think that that's a crapshoot. If I had gone to a different school and had these very same parents who still wanted the school to raise me because they couldn't, they didn't have the time to do so, I'm not sure where I would have been today. So I think that's it just kind of struck me because I'm thinking of how much pressure, or not even pressure, how much dependence and reliance a lot of parents have on the school doing its job. Whatever they think its, and its job isn't to raise your kids. That's the other point, is that it's not really their job to do that anyhow. But there's a lot of parents, maybe because they're very busy, maybe because they just revere education so much, whatever their reasons are, and I'm not going to judge parents who feel that way. I get it. I come from parents that did it too. But had I gone somewhere else and had I been exposed to different things, I wonder how much differently I would be thinking now. in terms of how we develop free thought, for example. I mean, I was lucky enough to have had a relatively good experience with the teachers and the material that we learned in school. So that didn't become this big issue for me. But if I were to have been going to school today as a young person, in ingesting and inhaling all of this kind of, chaotic propaganda type indoctrination, I don't know how I would have turned out as an adult, because the option of my parents to be there wasn't an option at all at that time.
Hmm. I think that's really interesting. I mean, how far do we end up from our family's values or the values that our family would have wanted to instill in us when we spend as children most of our waking life being taught by people who may have very different values? That makes me think of in my own childhood when I was growing up in South Texas. I was minority in the minority being Caucasian. There was a heavy dose of anti-white bias,
Mm,
where I lived. It was
Beautiful.
from the teachers, but mostly from the other kids. There was a lot of bullying. It was not cool. It was just basically it's not cool and to be white and you'd get picked on for it. And I think that the way I came to really understand that it's minority stress, it's in-group out-group dynamics. You're going to find that whether you're the black kid in a mostly white school or the white kid in the mostly Hispanic school or whatever your combo is, there's a vulnerability there. It doesn't have to be that way, but there's a tendency for people to go that way.
hmm
And I what I can remember, so my mom had really different social perspectives than I did. And I can remember the first time that we had sort of an argument about this. I must have been in second or third grade, and we were learning about Harriet Tubman.
mm,
And I was so inspired and so filled with just this beauty of this story of this woman who helped to free people from slavery. But I took it even a step further, and I don't know how much was being given to me by my school, but I just said, I remember being in the car driving with my mom and saying something about how I wish I was black because black people were better than us. They're better people. And I didn't know a lot of black people. There was this elderly black woman who would come over to use our phone sometimes, who lived down the street, and she was really sweet. And she did things like my brother was a little baby and she pinched his butt one time when he was running around. Like just like she was so cute. She was like really lovey and fun. And I remember being like, ooh, she touched his butt. That's gross. But he's just a
mm,
little baby running around, she's like pinched him. Anyway, she was a sweet lady. But I didn't know a lot of black people because my black kids were also minority in my school. So I was being taught this sort of black history lesson about slavery in such a way that I was filled with so much admiration for this other ethnic group. And I told my mom I wished I was black, that black people were just better than us,
mm,
that white people had done a lot of bad things.
mm,
And, I just saw black people as kind of like this beautiful victim at that
hmm
point, this beautifully. So it's interesting because my mom's response, and I was pretty little, so she didn't say a lot about this at the time. She went on to tell me more later, but she said, well, I grew up in LA after the Watts riots, and I saw a different side of things than that. And later, she told me about being jumped, having at a family picnic, having her brothers beat up by a couple of young black kids. There was just a lot of racial tension, and her impression was a very different. It was like a be cautious because these people hate you.
Right.
Not these are like lovely,
hmm
noble people. Anyway, so it was interesting, and we continued to have those kind of arguments, and I called her a bigot for years. I just thought my mom was a complete bigot. And that the way to feel right socially was to think of white people as these horrible people who had come and robbed the Indians of their land, enslaved the blacks, and basically, screwed everybody over. And I had a heaping dose of white guilt that I wore on me until probably my late teens when I realized that was
Wow.
a bunch of BS. But
That's
Wow.
sad. So I think that this is one of the benefits of being biracial
Mm.
is that I can see both sides of everything. And I really do look at people as individuals. When I hear people, especially this younger generation, I'm thinking of a particular student again who said that white people don't have a right to an opinion and they don't and this
Mm.
child is Caucasian, right? Um, but it's so intentional. Going back to my son's situation where he is supposed to give away his grade.
Mm.
Okay.
Hmm.
So you are assuming that no kid needs a scholarship. Some kids need a merit-based scholarship based on the fact that they're the best and brightest.
Hmm.
And you are taking that away from them when you
Hmm.
even out everyone.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And it's so intentional. It makes, the kids who feel guilty about it, some of them won't say it. He, the teacher asked for kind of a little report, like circle how much you think you contributed to the grade, how much you did this, right? And he told him off because,
Hmm.
he just said, this is ridiculous.
Mm.
You don't expect that we can do better. And that's wrong. And I 100% agree with that. Um, it is just sad to me how divided and how, I don't know, maybe I was the person and I didn't know it that people looked at and thought, oh, you're a better and more virtuous person because you've had to go through so much because of
Mm.
the color of your skin. And
Hmm.
I would say I can see why people would see that because of my particular situation.
Hmm.
But I've always known, hopefully I can say this, but I've always known really bitchy people of every
Hmm.
color,
Hmm.
including kids.
Mhm.
So, and so you've got to take people as individuals. In the next so when we get back to school, I'm going to teach about communism
Mhm.
Hmm.
and I'm going to show so many pictures and I'm going to, I take it very carefully that I'm going to peel back those ideas that these kids already have. That
Hmm.
kindness is supporting these rights over someone else's rights, right? Because this
Hmm.
is exactly what they taught those children in
Hmm.
communist countries and continue to teach them in communist countries. And it's exactly where we're at. But I have to be so careful with it because these are embedded. This is their identity. I'm a kind child and I'm more enlightened because I believe these things. It's very hard to look at these students and go, you're being taught to be a racist.
Mhm.
Hmm.
I can't say that to them.
Hmm.
I have to love them right through it. But you bet it hurts to go,
Hmm.
do they like me because they think I'm interesting because I'm Black? Or do they
Hmm.
like me because I'm actually an interesting person?
Hmm.
I think those are hard. I don't know. Honestly, it makes me very sad that people have to go through extremely bigoted situations that should never have happened. To me, a good teacher would immediately look at a room, like when you go into the lunchroom and the different kids sit at the different tables. I've
Yes.
noticed for years they divide by race. They divide by sports too, but oftentimes there's always a Hispanic table, and it hurts my heart.
Mhm.
So for me, I'll go and sit in the middle of the table and talk to the kids and because I want them to see that we have more in common than we don't. But it hurts my heart that educators think it's okay and they do
Hmm.
nothing
But
about
is
it.
it okay? Is it okay to group with people that look like you?
Um,
Or to feel safer with people that you think have more baseline in common with you? Is that okay? Or is that not okay?
can we change it from is it okay to I mean it's probably okay, but I don't think it's ideal.
Well, the reason I ask is because it kind of goes back to this idea that like our family values should be what
Yeah.
what educate us, not our community values, because when you get at the level of the community,
Yes.
you start to lose the individual. There's this flattening because it's impossible for one
Yes.
person to
Yes.
to hold in their mind and heart the diversity of people around them. Like, how many people is it possible to really be friends with? And
Hmm.
to
For
think
sure.
when you do a live stream and you think about who you're talking to,
Hmm.
how many
Right.
different people can you think of? Like, you think of so and so, and it makes you add in this thing because you're like, I know that so and so is thinking about it this way and might feel such and such, so I'll explain it like this so that they get me. But
Right.
how many so and so's can you talk to? There's a necessary sort of flattening. And if
Yeah.
we're in a flattened environment like a school where you're being taught at the level of the community, or even like, what is this one world thing, right? The one world
Right.
alliance, where we're supposed to be thinking on this super broad
Globalism.
level.
Hmm.
Does that, is there a sort of a natural response to kind of get a little bit more tribal?
I think there is, but I also think that there's a difference between is something okay, is something what you like to do, and also is school for teaching? Because if school's for teaching, then shouldn't we make those efforts while
But is
in
it for teaching
school?
education or is it for teaching social?
That,
I think that kind of comes back around to
yeah,
this whole thing,
it,
right?
it does, but at the same time, I don't think people should be afraid of people. You should be discerning, but children should not be so afraid of people that they never talk to other people, that they, like you go into a salon to get your nails done, and all of a sudden, people who fully speak English start speaking in another language so that you can't understand. Like, we don't need to have those feelings. And I feel like we can, maybe not all the time, but there should be like my perfect world, something I would love to start, and I probably will, are community dinners. Like you're assuming that your family values and my family values aren't the same thing. But I
Mhm.
bet you if we started listing what we're going to eat for Christmas dinner, we would have a lot of commonalities there. But we're taught to assume that we don't. We're taught to assume that we're so very different.
I
I
guess
mean,
I'm wondering if like the sitting at the table, and I don't know,
I
maybe
know,
I'm in a devil's advocate mood, or maybe
you're
I
fine.
am, maybe it's just because it does seem like principally it aligns with this whole issue of freedom of individual thought. Like if you're in that
I don't think you
school
have
and
to have best friends that look
bullying,
different than you, right?
there's not bullying, and they're not
Yeah,
they're able to sit and do homework and sit with whoever they want. But when they get the freedom to choose who they go and hang out with, that they
yeah.
choose people who they feel like are more like their family. Does that isn't
That
that
makes sense.
because
I'm
I know, like, going back to my growing up, there were very few white kids. There wasn't a
Hmm.
clump of white
right.
kids. I would say maybe like the hyper nerds were mostly white, but not necessarily. There were like nerds of all of all shades. So the really, really nerdy kids might have like a slightly overrepresented white, but the black kids hung out together. The black
Mhm.
kids just there was like a tight group, and not all of them. I mean, I had
Mhm.
one of my best friends in school was a mixed race girl, black and white, and she was alienated from the black kids. And anyway, it was
Oh, you do?
so, but, but, the you at lunch, it would be, you definitely see the black kids hanging out in one center.
Right.
And I, is that so bad? I don't know if that's so bad.
I I didn't have, and see, this is the thing, is it's so foreign to me, honestly, that this level of racism and division exists this day and age. Because when I was in school, and again, it has to do, I suppose, with where you were raised, where you lived, where you were in school, but we didn't have all this kind of racial division in this way. We
Hmm.
had status division.
Hmm.
So it was the kids that had money, or the kids that were
Right.
able to dress a certain way because they had the
Hmm.
financial resources, stuck together. The
Hmm.
kids that looked like they barely were, safety pinning their pants together because they
Hmm.
didn't have enough money for a new pair. They were hanging out with other kids that barely had money. Now, within those class groups was mixed race. Okay, so there
Hmm.
were mixes of races. I mean, there were some black kids that were very well to do, very well off, and they hung
Mhm.
out with the white kids who are very well to do and very well off, and some Asian kids, and so on and so forth. The only time that I really experienced this division of sitting specifically with people that are of your race was with the Asian population,
Mm,
surprisingly. We
mm,
had a huge Filipino, and I don't know if Filipino, specifically Islander, I should change that, but the Pacific Islander kind of group, where that was the Filipinos. And sometimes you'd have the Asian kids with them,
mhm,
and they kind of had their own thing. And they would sometimes, speak in their own language as well and kind of separated themselves. But outside of that particular situation. And that's where I would say it goes back to what you're talking about, Leslie, that they probably shared very similar family values. And that's what drew them to each
mm,
other. That's what I think was going on with those kids. The rest of the time, though, the rest of the kids, it was about having money. I wasn't upset that I couldn't be white or that I couldn't be. At one point, I wanted to be Latina because that was considered to be more beautiful than white women, and I wanted to be a Latina girl at one point. But having put that aside, that was shortly lived.
mhm,
The rest of the time, I just wanted my parents to have enough money to be able
mm,
to buy me the clothes that everybody else was wearing who did have money. And
mm,
it stopped being about the color of my skin or, being, not to say I didn't experience some bullying and some racism when I was in elementary. I did. I got called, names that I won't repeat here, but sand and then fill in the blank, the N word. Um, so that, yeah, that was rough.
mhm,
But I will say that that wasn't the majority of my experience. I have to look at what the bigger picture was, and then of course I have stories
mhm.
all around that. But it was about class and money, and that's what I was exposed to, and that's probably because I also went to a college prep high school where you had to pay to get in. But there were kids there that were on scholarship. There were kids there on financial aid. Not everybody had money, but some parents wanted to appear that way. So even if those kids didn't really have all that money, the parents put every last dime and cent into how they dress and
Mhm.
to giving off that particular,
That was a big
image.
deal.
That was a big deal, and that was the image that you wanted to have. So that's
And that
where
was
for
in
me was
California,
that was in the Bay Area.
Bay
So the
Area.
Bay Area in California is even more so left, okay, or very progressive than even down here in Southern California. All of California, not all of California. There's a lot of conservative California parts, but the two main, areas of concentration of the population, Southern California, and then you've got the Bay area of Northern California. And so that's where that was more of an issue. The first kid that got a car when she turned 16, it wasn't a big deal, that she was, a white girl or a blonde girl. It was a big deal that she got the car, and other kids then wanted that same car. They wanted to be recognized in that way. One of the most well liked and most attractive guys at our school is a black guy who played football, and the girls drooled over him. So I didn't see so much of this until I went to college. And then, going forward, teaching in college. So to me, this is almost just being introduced into my personal, world and view in the past, let's say 10, 15 years or so, where I could really get a grasp on that because it's just not what I experienced or what I witnessed.
And I think that's really interesting. I wonder if part of the reason I wonder, I was in an economically depressed area. I grew up pretty poor. There were status symbols. I remember when everybody wanted to wear Guess jeans.
Oh, yes.
And it was
And
funny
bomb
because
equipment.
well there was such a popular trend of putting the Guess symbol even on like knockoff jeans. So people would have their Kmart
Yes.
jeans and you could see where they'd removed the other label and it was darker denim and then there was the little Guess symbol. So that was a big deal. But people didn't have a lot of money where I grew up. There were people, it was pretty poor. And race was the biggest divider, I'd say. When
Hmm.
I was a kid, it
Hmm.
was the big divider.
I think it's because I went to private school. I went to a very I lived in a poor area too, but because I went to private school and my parents were, I guess K through eighth grade, it wasn't so expensive. I mean, but again, my parents were working two jobs to do this for us. It wasn't as expensive. Where I went to school in high school, though, people were coming from multiple areas. They weren't necessarily living in the same area where the school was located. So you'd get this variety of people coming in
Mhm.
from different parts of town. Some were living in really expensive, beautiful areas up in the hills. Some were living in the more economically depressed
Mhm.
areas or poverty stricken areas. And so I think that it would have been interesting to go to a public school. I think if I had done that, because public schools, right, you have to live in the area in which you attend the school, would have been a different experience for me. I may have seen some different responses or behaviors,
Yeah,
but
there was such an underachiever mentality where I was. It was all about being tough, and there was like a sexual element to it. Like you wanted to have a lot of conquests, you wanted to be really hot, you wanted to be really sexually active, and I was not cool because I was a virgin for too long. And it was these kinds of things were very present. There was a lot of gang behavior,
mhm,
lots of just we had armed cops that walked the hallways and metal detectors on the doors at my high school. A
wow.
lot of it felt kind of like a jail. And
Yeah.
they didn't teach us about how to go to college. So you said you went to college prep. I didn't even get talked to about how to go to college. I remember wanting to go to college after I finished high school, and I didn't know how. Like, how does a person
Hmm.
go to college? So I went to the community college and stood in a bunch of lines trying to ask the right questions and ended up going home without figuring it out. Like, I was like, I
Hmm.
guess I'm not going to go to college. I'm just going to go back to Wendy's and that's where I worked. I worked at Wendy's.
Right,
But
right.
I didn't know how, let alone have somebody prep us on
Hmm.
taking an
Hmm.
SAT. I'd never been told
Hmm.
that you could even do that. What was that? So it
Right.
was a very different thing where we kids were counseled to drop out. I took a PE credit working in the office a couple semesters and to get out of PE class. And the vice principal would call in these boys who had these massive thick files of all the times they'd gotten in trouble. And he would just stand right there in the like I could hear what they were saying, and he would talk to them about dropping out. Like, don't you just want to? There's more for you out there than in here. And he
Wow.
would counsel kids to drop out of school. So
Wow.
it was just a very rough place. And I don't know if it's like this everywhere, if this was just kind of the culture where I was, but as much as the tension between the Hispanics and the white kids was the Mexican American kids and the white kids, there was like being white was not cool. It was just decidedly uncool. You were automatically like a super dork if you were white,
Hmm.
unless you were extremely hot, and that was kind of a get out of jail free thing. And that was
Hmm.
just a couple. There was like one girl I can think of that was really really pretty, so she got like a pass. But
Hmm.
the tension between the Hispanic kids and the black kids was way worse. The Hispanic kids really hated the black kids. They had
Yeah.
all these special words for them that were worse than the words that we know.
Yeah.
And so it was just the race was where it really took hold. The animosity between
Right.
people was focused on race.
And that's where I think that it comes full circle into what is the teacher's agenda.
Mhm.
I
Mm.
believe that a teacher's agenda should be to create a better world. The question then becomes, what does better mean? To me, my agenda is I want you to be able to respect the people around you. I want you to not put labels on them and assume that because they come from this, that this means this is all they are. So, and I think that anyone who's worth their salt as an educator, that would be their attitude. The problem then is that everything gets usurped. So I know we're almost finished, but one of the things they're doing is they're taking The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and now Netflix is redoing it to make it woke. Okay,
Oh
and
no.
the reason that this fits is because somebody gets to determine what it means to be good. And I think inherently we know there's nothing wrong with having your, group of girlfriends that you guys look alike and do similar things with. There's nothing wrong with that. What becomes wrong is when you're uncomfortable around the other people. And of course, sometimes we're uncomfortable for a reason. There are people who make you uncomfortable, but I try to look at it as the individual. this person doesn't make me uncomfortable because they are a different skin tone than me or because they have more money than me. They make me uncomfortable because they're looking down on me, because they're condescending to me, because they're doing whatever. That's what makes me uncomfortable. And if I honestly just don't have it in me, I don't have a thing in me that says, ooh, those people bad just as a group, or those people bad. And I know really bad people in most groups, but I also am blessed to know that there's amazing people. I think, we're doing this, or you're going to put it up around Christmas. And I think that faith plays a part in that. To me, once you become a Christian, everybody's your brother and sister, period. There isn't this group and that group and whatever else. And so I try to look at the world through that lens. And that's my goal with my students. I had a kid who had the book that I despised worse, which is one of those books like the new Anne of Green Gables or the new Little Women that have been wokeified. And I love this kid. I love this kid. And it breaks my heart that I almost wonder if it was sent into my classroom to see what I would say about it. Like, that's how I think it's what's probably going on there, right? But the thing is that it's my job to first and foremost love this kid. And then if I can explain to them through what propaganda is through communism, then that's a big win. But if I see kids who are treating another kid badly because they're the wrong color, it's my job. It's my job to try to unify them, not to give them this, I can't believe you do that, you're a terrible human being, not to guilt them, but just to show them, hey, the two of you could play chess together, have fun, like intentionally making it so people aren't bigots. I think that should be the first requirement of being a teacher. So
well said. Well,
Yes.
that's a good message. That's a good message to leave it on. It's always nice to talk with you too.
Yes, of
And
course. Always.
I hope you both have a wonderful Christmas and get to
Thank you. Yes.
have a good time with your families.
You too. Absolutely.
Are you doing anything fun? Just staying local?
Staying local.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Awesome.
So it should be good.
Well, have a wonderful time, and
Thank you
I'll
so
see
much.
you in the new year.
Okay, sounds good.
All
And
right,
thanks to everybody
take care,
watching.
Elise.
All
Okay,
right.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.